And then you've also made a personal connection with them. They like you, they trust you. And so you alluded to, Steve, the three stages of the client journey, which is the prospect experience, the new client, and the ongoing. And so really through all stages, we want to think, how do we keep adding value and how do we keep expanding that personal connection to what I like to refer to as the business friendship. It's not like a normal friendship. It's more of a business friendship, but most people understand that. And some of those happen quite naturally. So with a prospect experience, what we're trying to do here is lead with value and become trustworthy, worthy of trust. One of the most powerful things one can do early on in a new relationship to help win the business as well as become more referable is to talk.
Welcome to the Sales Problem Podcast. Here is the problem we are trying to solve. Every year you hit the reset button and you have to beat your numbers and grow your business. You have to get quicker, faster, and better. We are two guys trying to solve that sales problem, trying to help you grow by enhancing what you know about the art and science of selling and personal development. Along the way, we're going to interview some interesting characters and debate some different angles about this common business problem. So thanks for joining us. Let's get growing. Welcome back to the Sales Problem Podcast. It is season 2. And I'm your host, Daniel Burns, and joining me is my regal, my reliable, and highly referable co-host, Steve Comerford. Steve, we're going to jump into the coffee segment once again. Take our listeners into your kitchen. What's cooking in your coffee maker today?
Hey, Dan, always a pleasure to be with you again. Looking forward to our interview today. And I thought, coffee, get my mind going, get going for the day. But considering that we're, meeting a publisher and a writer and a gentleman that has a couple of books, and Bill, I'm not too sure if you're aware of Margaret Atwood, but there's an Atwood blend that I thought I'd share today. It's from Balzac's Coffee here in Ontario. They have a number of coffee shops around the province, and I enjoy a bunch of blends, but I thought I'd bring this one forward in that, considering that Bill's a writer and publisher. And the coffee is pretty good at the same time, too. So that's my blend for today from Balzac's, and it's pretty delicious. So I give it a 4 out of 5 beans, Dan.
Ooh, I like it. I will link all the listeners, Steve, to that one. Very thoughtful choice, too. I like that you put the thought into it. Just a reminder to our listeners, we are not sponsored by any coffee companies, but this is something that Steve and I love is coffee. So we're trying to add some value for you. The coffee that I selected today is called Anchored Coffee, and it's from the Maritimes. It's a local brew right here in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. And I have to be honest, what got me is the name of the Anchored Coffees. There's lots of coffees, but this one is called Nighthawk. And I just love that name. It popped out to me because I thought instantly of like an 80s or a 90s vibe. It was like an American Gladiator in my cup, Nighthawk. Or I thought of, Miami Vice and all those great shows, the A-Team and Knight Rider and all those things. That name just took me right there. So, and Steve, we've got people listening from 9 different countries. So what I like is that this is something that is local here, but if you're in Finland or Australia where our listeners are, I'm going to put a link in the show notes that you can try a local coffee, order it up and ship it out. This one has a great aroma when it brews. It's got a bit of a nutty flavor. It's a little bit lighter than other coffees. A little hint of chocolate there too. It is absolutely delicious. I'm giving it a rating, Steve, of 4 out of 5 beans. And if you visit Dartmouth, there's a great little cafe that sells it. It's called Tibbs, 2 if by C. So if anybody's in the Dartmouth area and you're visiting, stop by Tibbs and get a cup and get some Anchor coffee. Let's jump straight into our guest, Steve. We've got Bill Cates on today, and let me tell you why he's on our podcast. What is the biggest missed opportunity in all of sales? Well, I think 90% of people, they can pitch a product. I think 90% of salespeople can get out there, they can give a proposal, they can even get an order. But I think that 90% of people miss this one important thing, and that is referrals. And I have to be honest, it's something in my career that I don't think I've done enough of. So I'm so excited to have Bill on here. Maybe I'll get some coaching today. This podcast is about improvement. Steve and I improve every episode. We want our listeners to improve. And I got to admit, Bill, I've had some awkwardness around this. So I'm excited to hear what you're going to tell us. Let me tell you a little bit more about Bill. As a successful entrepreneur, Bill Cates started, built, and sold 2 successful book publishing companies. After selling his second company, Bill turned his attention to helping businesses speed up their growth through 2 critical stages: multiplying their best clients or customers through referrals and introductions from advocates, I think is so important. And number 2, communicating more relevant and compelling value. Bill is the author of 4, count them, 4 best-selling books: Getting More Referrals Now, Don't Keep Me a Secret, Beyond Referrals, and Radical Relevance. And the most important thing for our listeners to know is that thousands of businesses and professionals are using Bill's system. I think that's a key word, is that there's a system to attract a steady flow of high-quality clients through referrals. So listeners, give a warm welcome to our guest today, Referral Coach. I love that title, Bill Cates. Bill, welcome to the podcast. Maybe give our listeners a version of who you are and tell us a little bit about how you became a referral coach.
Sure. First of all, I have to talk about Steve's reference to Margaret Atwood, and I don't know that I've ever been put in that same sentence, or probably don't have
maybe
the class that she does, author of The Handmaid's Tale and so many other great books. Now, sometimes, though, I do get confused with Bill Gates. That comes up from time to time. But Bill Gates has a lot of money. What I say to folks is, I'm going to help you make more money by serving more clients. So I've been at this for 32 years. When I first started in let's say the training, writing, consulting business, I was a prospecting speaker, coach. I like the pursuit, if you will, the thrill of the hunt, you might say. And so it was natural that when I listened to some tapes, some of the folks listening are old enough to remember tapes, on referrals this guy had written, I go, I really like that, but I'd probably say it this way and I do this way. So within about a month, I decided I was going to write my first book on referrals, and it was called Unlimited Referrals. It's no longer in print, although I occasionally see it for sale for about $5 on eBay and things like that. But I started focusing on referrals quite early in this, and what I've discovered, and you kind of alluded to it, Daniel, I've often called referrals forgotten gold, because people know it's important. They see it as kind of the icing on the cake, right? We're getting repeat referral business. But to me, for a lot of businesses, maybe not all businesses, but for a lot of businesses, particularly service businesses, referrals are the cake. I mean, that's how people would prefer to meet you. Think about how your best clients come to you, or how do they prefer to meet you, and how do you prefer to meet them? It's usually an introduction from someone else they already trust. So I say, why not build a business based on that? At least predominantly on that. It doesn't have to be everything you do. And gosh, I've just been teaching for so long. When I was writing my first book, I know this is going to sound a little weird, and a little woo-woo, but I swear I felt like I was channeling someone, somehow. It was just like I was meant to be writing this. It was nothing had ever flowed so easily for me when I started working on my first book on referrals. And I guess I'm kind of a natural in this. And, 32 years later, pretty successful business. Who would have known?
Well, Bill, I really a privilege meeting you, and thank you. I'm curious. We'd like to give something back to our listeners that are in their car or they're just about to make that phone call or have that meeting. And if you were to coach me on how to change that meeting to then, find that forgotten gold or look for those referrals or build that into my meeting or to my sales call, what would you help me there with?
Sure. Well, first of all, I have to say there's some things you probably should have done before that car ride. We can get back to that, right? And what I mean by that is, number one, the mindset has to be there, and we can talk about that if you want. I know you guys like to address the mindset, the limiting beliefs that we all carry around with us around certain things, and so you got to get that straight a little bit first. You also want to make sure you're highly referable, and we can talk about that as well. But the scene that you set in the car, ready to go to an appointment, what can you do? Well, two things. One is to make sure you're indeed referable. Well, how do you know you're referable? Well, there's different ways. Unsolicited referrals is one barometer. Everybody on this call should be getting referrals without asking. That's one of the barometers. But then also your clients give you value recognizing statements. They say things that make you realize that they have realized the value. They thank you for going to bat for them, for explaining things, for staying in touch in a good way. All kinds of ways clients thank us, right? Sometimes we get a hug. That's a value recognizing statement, right? And so that's when we're becoming referable. But to kind of just make sure, what I would do is near the end of the meeting, maybe not the very end, but near the end, I'd ask what I call a value-seeking question, a value discussion. And it's something like this. Let's say they've just become a client. I might say, I think you made a great decision. And I know you had a lot of choices. We've talked about a lot of things. I'm curious what stands out, what tipped the scales for you. I want to ask an open-ended question where I can learn about the thinking of the process that led them to do business with me. First, it cements their decision. Nothing wrong with that. But we're also learning from that. As they articulate the value, they get more in touch with it. We get in touch with it. It helps us feel more comfortable about the possibility of promoting or asking for referrals or introductions. So that's one of the important reasons we do that. Also, if it's further along in the relationship where we say, we've been working together for a year now, any place we're falling short on expectations, any place that could use a little work, to make sure we fix that or don't do it in the future. And, usually clients go straight to the good stuff, but every now and then you're going to clear up a little something that maybe needs to be expressed. And so that's the value of that value discussion. And that's the jumping off point for being proactive for referrals or introductions. Proactive, two ways to be proactive. One is planting seeds, promoting. I've been teaching the expression, I didn't invent it, but teaching it, don't keep me a secret, right, for years. Hey, glad you found this valuable. Don't keep me a secret out there. Or never too busy to see if we can be a resource for other people you care about, and things like that. A lot of different ways to do that. A lot of people do that, and they think that's asking. It's not. That's promoting. There's a difference. And then the ask, the most important thing in the ask that we could cover briefly here is it is starting as specific as you can. The mistake that most people make, I've made it, most people have made it, is throwing open the whole universe and say, who do you know we can help? Who do you think should be aware of what we do, or any variation of that? The problem is it usually fizzles. The goal is to try to help them picture people in their mind's eye. And when they picture people in their mind's eye, there's a name associated with that. So it could be, I know a couple of people, I was hoping you might feel comfortable introducing me to them. Can I run it by you? So start with specific people, they know. It could be categories of people who are typically in on the lookout for the kind of business and products and services you represent, things that are going on in their business or their life that make them candidates for the work you do. And then you can expand from there. but don't start with that. Start as specific as you possibly can. So value discussion, make sure that, good stuff going on in that relationship, and then come specific with the ask.
Thanks. I'll jump on that. Those two pieces around the new
Please.
client and ongoing relationships. There was a third that I saw in one of your webinars was around prospects. There was three: prospects, a new client, and ongoing relationships. Is there something different that you would suggest for a prospecting call or that type of meeting where you would try to receive unsolicited referrals or build referrals from that?
Sure. And it depends a lot on the business, because there's some businesses where it's easier to become more referable more quickly. Take, for instance, a financial advisor or a business consultant. It's not transactional. It's very relational. A lot of probing going on, a lot of teaching going on. Obviously, easier to become more referable there, probably, than describing the characteristics of a product. So the key here is what we've, and research has come out of Canada, actually, from Julia Littlechild in Toronto, is she discovered that, satisfied clients or customers are loyal. They don't give a lot of referrals. There's a low correlation. What we need to create is engaged clients or customers. All right. So what's an engaged client or customer? That's someone who's feeling connected or engaged with the value that you bring, meaning they like the questions you ask, they like the things you teach, they like the responsive service, all the kind of value-oriented things. And then you've also made a personal connection with them. They like you, they trust you. And so you alluded to, Steve, the three stages of the client journey, which is the prospect experience, the new client, and the ongoing. And so really through all stages, we want to think, how do we keep adding value, and how do we keep expanding that personal connection to what I like to refer to as the business friendship. It's not like a normal friendship. It's more of a business friendship, but most people understand that. And some of those happen quite naturally. So with a prospect experience, what we're trying to do here is lead with value and become trustworthy, worthy of trust. One of the most powerful things one can do early on in a new relationship to help win the business as well as become more referable is to talk about why they believe in the value of the work that they do. And it's their emotional connection to the work, to the value. And it goes a little something like this, Daniel, Steve, that's a little bit about my company and the work I do. Obviously, we have a lot of questions for each other. I want to shift gears just for a second and tell you a little bit about, where I'm coming from here, what my mission is, what drives me every day. And then I'll explain why I'm connected to what I do and why it's important and what that means to you. And so it's a little self-revealing. Sometimes it could be self-effacing humor. Sometimes I could be revealing, an awkwardness or a mistake I made in the past. But what happens there is you become more human. And it also gives them permission to be a little more self-revealing. And so that little why you believe in the value is something, again, will help you win the business and become more referable more quickly. So I hope that answers the question.
It does, because I wanted to go there. I'm glad you went there, because I had written down client-focused why, the emotional connection to your value. And you probably hit it at the front end of my question too, is before that sales call, is you probably needed to do that work before you walk in the door and really hone in or develop that why of who you are and what you're bringing. So thank you for that. Yeah.
And the why could be something that happened to you specifically, or a friend or family member. It could also be something you've just observed in how other people benefit from the work you do, or some, significant problem you solve for someone, and the meaning and the value it had for others. So it could be something you observed, and that puts you in touch with the value. So there's a lot of different ways to come at this, without question. And I know that a lot of folks know their why. They've done that work, but they often feel awkward bringing it into the conversation. Some people think, well, this is about me. Shouldn't I be about them? Well, yeah, you should be about them. And these folks They like to have a sense of who you are, right? Especially if you're at a big, high level, high ticket sale, they like to know who they're dealing with, and so that actually helps them to get a sense of you. And we always want to end it with what's a benefit to the prospect or client. In other words, here's why I'm telling you this story, right? Yeah, it's a little bit about us, but then we turn it. So I want to make sure what happened to me or what happened to that client of mine never happens to anybody else, right? So it's given me heightened awareness or heightened tools and knowledge to make sure that never happens to anybody. So we bring it back to that prospect or client. So it really does become about them again.
So many great insights here, Bill. I'm writing so many little notes and things, but I think you've hit on something really important for our listeners in this why, and them understanding why they do it, how they add value to people that they're selling to. I think you've nailed it, that creates connection as well, and that little bit of vulnerability that's injected into selling can be the difference between somebody who's good and somebody who's great, and really connecting those relationships.
It makes you real. It makes you authentic.
Yeah.
You give them permission to be a little more authentic, vulnerable, whatever. Always good.
Yeah. And I like that you connect it back, that you still keep it about them. And I think another differentiator that I see sometimes between good salespeople and great salespeople is on this topic of referrals, because so many salespeople do so many great things and their success really does stay hidden. It's not something that they end up, connecting to another prospect. Before I get into a question to you, Bill, I want to come back to something you said, because I don't want it to get buried for our listeners. When you mentioned woo-woo and you're writing the book, the thing that popped out to me is there's probably listeners that also, Bill, have that message inside them.
Sure.
And, if they've got a niche or they're passionate about something, I just wanted to come back to that. I thought it was so important that if you've got that feeling and you've got a book idea or, something you're really passionate about, to pull on that thread and let it go.
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to be at your best, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
So if we shift gears and go to your book, Radical Relevance, where you focus on right people, the right time, and the right message. Bill, in today's selling world, how do we nail our message so that we are more relevant to our customers?
Yeah, it's a big question, and there's a couple ways to look at it. There's kind of a strategic relevance and a tactical relevance, if you will, the macro, the micro. So generally speaking, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to sales messaging, when it comes to bringing a product or service to market, the narrower the target, the better. Right? So that's a principle. It's not always the truth, but in most cases it is. And, you ask someone, who needs this product, who needs this service? Well, everybody. Okay, well, that's about the worst marketing you could ever think of, right? And so it's not always easy for people to narrow and to get more focused. But what happens when you narrow to a specific market, certain demographics, psychographics, the narrower you get, the more powerful your message becomes because it's more relevant to those folks. Now, you can have more than one target market. You can have more than one bullseye on a target within a market. But when we think of narrowing, and we're not trying to be all things to all people. And let me give you an example. We'll use a website as kind of the canvas to paint this idea on. On most people's websites, it's the hero banner, the big banner where there's video or whatever, and there's the headline and all that. If you have a very specific target market and you solve a very specific problem or help someone create a very specific opportunity, and your business is built around that, but you better say that right there, right? The first thing they see on your website, right? Because the key word here, guys, is empathy. People need to see themselves in your messaging, okay? And yeah, some of it can be about you a little, but mostly it's got to be about them and how they see themselves in it. Now, let's say you have a business where you have 2 or 3 targets. Well, what I've done on my website, and a lot of folks I've helped, and just people do it naturally, is their main website could be like a splitter page where it says, if you're this, click here. If you're this, click here. If you're this, click here. And then everything that ensues is related to that specific person. So they're going to identify based on how you describe. And then everything you talk about is as relevant to them as possible. When you keep trying to create messaging that brings in different folds and different types of people, that messaging is just naturally not going to be as strong. And so we have to narrow. So that's a big principle at play here. And that's why I talk about niche markets and things like that. So that's kind of on a strategic. Now another part of that strategic, is also once you decide on a target market, and like I said, it could be more than one target market, you really get to know that market. I mean, you go deep and you really get to know those people, and you read what they're reading and you listen to what they're listening to, and you really become the expert, if you will, in your area within that market. And again, your messaging is going to be more powerful. One of the ways to show people that you really know their world is through the questions you ask, right? If you ask a prospect a question that shows a knowingness of their world, consciously or unconsciously, they're thinking, oh, this person, gets us, knows us, they've been here before. Very important. So on the tactical, it's similar in that you make sure you do some research before you reach out to anybody. Right. I mean, I'm not the first person on your podcast that have said that, I'm sure. But, I don't know. Some people are lazy. Some people don't make the time. But the ones who do, man, it stands out. We all know what it's like to get someone reach out to us on LinkedIn, and you can tell it's a copy paste message, or they read something we wrote, a post that we made, or something whatever, right? They've seen us speak. However they just, maybe even they just pay attention to where we went to university, right? Somehow they've paid a little bit of attention. And that's what allows us to give them a little bit of our valuable time. So the more you can research before you reach out to a prospect and get in your car to visit with them, again, that's about relevance, right? And the more relevant, the more they're going to pay attention to what you have to say.
There's so many great insights. I don't know which one to pick to focus on, but how about this? Because you are the first person, Bill, that has brought up empathy on our podcast. And I just want to highlight how important I think that is. I think when, we think from the other person's perspective, when we start to put ourselves in the shoes of our client and say, what are the problems that I am trying to solve? What are they going through? What's the impact of what they're going through? I think that is a differentiator between good salespeople and great, if you have a high empathy to you.
If I could add to that, if you don't mind, First of all, just to make sure, empathy is not the same as sympathy. Empathy is a understanding of and appreciation for someone's situation, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe you're not exactly where they are, but you've been through something similar, so you have a sense. Mm-hmm. Okay, so not just, it also comes through the words that you use, and your best source of the words for you to use in your marketing and your sales will actually come from your market, from your clients, customers, prospects. And I have the 17 rules of radical relevance in my book, Radical Relevance. And rule number 2 is give your customers, clients a seat at the table. And what I mean by that is as you're developing marketing language, as you're developing products, services, just anything significant, go to some of your clients or customers and talk to them. And how does it resonate with them? And how would they say it? And I'll give you one specific example. I had a guy, Michael Schmitz. I was doing this. He's retired now, but he was in San Mateo, California, retired to Idaho or somewhere. And but he said to me when I was doing this, he says, Bill, I tell people that you make asking for referrals as natural as breathing. And I go, whoa, that's really good. I never would have thought of that. And I said, can I use that, Michael? Yeah, of course you can use that, Bill. And so, and I can't tell you how many folks I've coached over the years where when they do this, all of a sudden, all the ideas they had around how they're going to talk about what they do has changed a little bit, because now they're going to talk in terms of the words and the concepts and the phrases that their clients are actually talking in terms of, which is always more effective. And by the way, I use that statement, Bill Cates makes referrals as natural, asking for referrals as natural as breathing. But I don't just say that. I'm always quoting Michael Schmitz. Because if I was just saying it, on my website or wherever, it'd be kind of like marketing hype. Like, yeah, okay, sounds cool, right? Whatever, right? Who's this guy think he is? But so I'm not bragging. I'm quoting, right? I'm quoting what somebody actually told me. And one of the best ways to brag about your business and to talk about what makes you different to other folks, especially if you feel uncomfortable bragging, is to say, my clients tell me. I just had a client tell me this. My clients tell me that, right? And so you can say that thing that feels like bragging, but you're just quoting somebody, and it's the truth. And it's very, very effective. And it also has that social proof element, that kind of testimonial element to it as well. So anyway, you got me on a roll on that one, guys.
well, you're going actually to a place that I was hoping you were going to go to, because just personally, I really had this curiosity, kind of take it, out of the box a little bit. But testimonies you mentioned, and if you think about either written testimonies or video testimonies, is that the same thing as referrals? Is it just a referral in a different format? And it'll be a two-part, because here's why I'm asking, Bill. I am more comfortable asking somebody to do something in print or video than to kind of, would you pick up the phone and call somebody or do it, give me an introduction. I find it just a softer way that, personally I feel more comfortable. Is there a difference between the two, you think?
Yeah, there is a difference. They're cousins, without question. Okay. They're in the same family. Because if someone gives a testimonial, especially if it's within the same industry that you normally serve, there's that little element of commonality, right? There's a little empathy, because the person reading the testimonial can see that person is a little bit like them, right? They're saying something nice. There's an endorsement. So yeah, it's a cousin. And I usually try to get both from clients, and sometimes I get one or the other. I have an old friend, by the way. I was in a book publishing company with him. He was one of my partners in one of my companies. He calls them testimonials, right? Which I think is great. It's a bunch of baloney. But let me give you my little rant on these two. This is that concept of social proof. It's been around forever. Everybody uses them, right? You see testimonials everywhere. In commercials on television, print, websites, you name it. Now, it depends a little bit on your business, but I just want to encourage people to make these things as real as possible, meaning it's not just a statement that says LG Green, Alberta. No photo. We don't know who this person is, right? Is it a real person? Yeah. So I'm always using full names. I'm usually using the company name, as long as they'll let me do that, where they live most of the time, photograph. You want to make these things as real as possible. Now, with video testimonials, let me give you a little hint, because we use these a lot. Whenever they're on our website, we have the video. They can click the play button, but underneath it is an excerpt from the video, because they don't always click on it. Or if I have 3 in a row, they may not play all 3, but within a matter of seconds, they can read the essence of all 3 right below. And then they see that somebody actually took the time to create a video testimonial for me. So it's just a simple little tactical thing that you make sure that message gets conveyed, whether they watch the video or not. Now, we can talk about why you don't like to ask for introductions and why there's that reluctance and all that, and probably not a bad thing, because most people do have that. That's why I'm in business. But so there's a relationship with a testimonial for sure.
Okay.
Well, Bill, you talked about your books and you talked about Beyond Referrals. I think one of your books is talking about systems. One thing that we've learned from a lot of the conversations we've had on this podcast from some key elite business people and athletes is around discipline and routine. And so I got to think that this ties into systems and making referrals discipline and routine. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I think that's where it either succeeds or fails.
Yeah.
Like
So let me hit on two levels. So from a strategic level, the system in a nutshell for me is three words: engagement, leverage, connection. So you heard me talk about engagement: engage clients, engage customers, engage prospects. We got to create that feeling of engagement and that referability. And then we want to leverage that. How do we do that? We do that by promoting and asking for introductions, which we've already talked about a little bit. And then connection means introduction. And if you picture that in a wheel where you're creating engaged relationships, and then you're leveraging that, and then you're getting connected, a real solid introduction to that new person, and then you use the principles of engagement with that new prospect, then that wheel just turns forever. And, it's a perpetual flow of good quality clients. So that's kind of the strategic level. Now, in terms of habits and discipline, like an athlete perhaps or a musician, they all have pre-game routines, right? Athletes have pre-game routines, whether it's soccer or hockey or whatever it is. There's certain things they do, right? Baseball. I was a professional drummer for a number of years, and I had a concert routine that I would do and how I warmed up. So there's a pre-appointment routine that everyone can go through. And so the first thing to do is create an agenda for the meeting. Always run a meeting from an agenda, whether it's 2 items or 10 items or anything in between. You'll run a better meeting, and it'll be a more efficient meeting. And you'll be reminded of things you want to make sure you do, et cetera. And people love it. They love checking off the boxes. They love to see you're organized. So create the agenda. Now, near the end of the agenda, you're going to have the words value discussion or value check-in, or it could be even expectations check to see if expectations are matching. And that's your reminder to go in and have that conversation. And then when you do that, you might be proactive in some way. So the next part of your pregame routine is, who do you know who they know? Who's come up in conversations? What have you learned about the industry association they're in, or where they're involved in philanthropic activities or whatever? Who do you know they know? And that's the bullseye. That's where you want to start. But then also those categories, right? Every business has categories, things that people are going through or businesses going through that make them ripe for the work you do. And your clients may know some of those people. And so you're doing that work. And then the last item on the pre-game routine, if you will, is practice. Now you can practice yourself driving in a car to the appointment if you want. You can practice with a colleague or someone else. But what you don't want is the first time the words come out of your mouth is with the client, right? You want to run it through once or twice so you feel confident. It boosts your confidence, it creates more fluidity, and you're going to have a much better conversation. So that's a very clear discipline. Now, look, you may have a value discussion and realize, well, there's some problems that need to be worked on. I'm not going there yet. Or you may wimp out. I mean, we all wimp out from time to time. That's okay. Look, people in sales, you think about salespeople, right? Most salespeople have a high need of approval, and we like to win. We like to win the sale. We like the recognition. And yet we put ourselves in position to fail like every day, right? And to get rejected every day. I'm sure a psychiatrist could have a field day with that personality type. So we may wimp out. We may not get what we want. But like you said, we have the discipline to make it happen. And that's where the results get produced, is with a discipline, right?
Yeah. I like your point around an agenda. I think too often we're walking in unprepared, or it's a loose agenda. And yes, you've booked an hour, but these meetings go an hour and a half. Is that a good meeting? I'm not too sure if that's a good meeting, or something that's compact and has its points. And I love the piece at the end of where you can be open and honest and be a little bit humble about how you're bringing value or not bringing value to that client, and what you need to do next to I imagine, earn that right for that
right
referral.
That's right. It's an earned right. You're absolutely right about that. And it's not something we do to someone. We're not pushing someone to do something we don't want, that they don't want to do. The old way referrals have been taught, it's like in the insurance industry in the US and the Canada, and they've been taught this to say, let me tell you how I get paid. I get paid in two ways. And one of those ways is referrals and yada, 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 all about the agent, the advisor, when it really should be about the client,
Mm-hmm.
right? And their world. That's not the perspective I teach. I teach it about the value. Let's pay it forward. Let's bring the value that you've experienced into other people you care about. And we're asking for help. Asking for help is a sign of high, healthy ego. You know, asking for help is not a sign of failure, by the way, a weakness that some people equate that. And here we're asking for help to help others, to bring this. And a lot of clients love to help us and love to help others. And some don't, and it's fine. It's not going to hurt a relationship, right? I often say that you got about 20% of your clients will give you referrals, make introductions without asking, just do a good job, create good relationships. We all should be getting those, right? Then you have about another 20%, give or take. You could run into a burning building and save their children. They wouldn't do this for you or others. They just don't like to do this. My dad was probably like that. And then there's that 60%. That's kind of the gold mine that we're trying to bring forward and find those folks that are more willing to do it.
Good point. I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit, and
sure.
In doing some research, and Dan has pulled up some good facts about you, but I was kind of But you trekked through the Himalayas. You're in the Andes in Peru. You did the Kashmir in India. You've the summit Kilimanjaro. Cycled across Iceland and Vietnam. Camped in the Arctic Circle. I don't know how you camp in the Arctic Circle.
Yeah, and flew into where do we fly into? Whitehorse. Yeah, Whitehorse.
Okay, and up that way.
Up that way, and then Dawson City, and up to the Dempster Highway.
Yep. Crazy. So, and then you talked about being a drummer. So then, how do you tie all that together? Life learnings. You talked about being authentic, and how does that tie into what you're doing today?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I can't say I've ever been asked that one exactly like that. I guess my answer, what comes to mind here is, obviously I like adventure travel. I'm going to do it as long as I can do it. A little older, so my body doesn't work quite as well as it used to, but still doing pretty well. I've got a cycling trip to Greece coming up in a couple weeks. Supposed to have a big hiking trip, camping trip in Patagonia in January. So, I'm keeping it going. And to me, business, sales, I mean, it's kind of an adventure like that, right? It's like, you have successes, you have failures. I don't get too tied to one or the other. I could be on the phone with the biggest prospect, biggest client I could ever have. I just don't get caught up in that anymore, like maybe I used to. Let's call it the Zen of sales. I don't know. I just take an even keel when it comes to that. And I found that makes a pretty nice difference where I can show up more authentically. And when people see you're not begging for the business. I mean, I'll let people know if I'm a good match and that I would love to work with them. Don't get me wrong. I will ask for the business and I will demonstrate that, but I just don't get too tied up. So, I don't know how I went from there to the travel, but, I love new adventures and seeing things that are different. I guess I do the same thing in business. The most dangerous of all of those, by the way, was traveling North America as a drummer in a rock and roll band. We can do another podcast.
That was the most dangerous.
I almost got shot by a few jealous husbands along the way, ex-husbands, really. There were some tough places we played. This was a long time ago. Oh, man.
I love all the insights, Bill. What I'm pulling out of this, and I want our listeners to really key in on this because it's something that I talk to salespeople on my team about. It's about building your brand as a salesperson. And I think everything that Bill has given us here is helpful to you building your brand as a salesperson. And what does that mean? How are you different? How are you, adding value and creating value around your brand? Because there's a lot of salespeople out there doing the same thing. as you. So how do you stand out? How do you go from good to great?
Yep. And I think that authenticity that we talked about earlier is a big one. Some people are naturally authentic. They can kind of do it, pull it off that way. Some people maybe have to work on it a little bit. But that's one way you stand out for sure. Knowledge of your customer or your potential customer, their business, their situation, their life, their world. I was interviewed you scared me a little bit when you said you did a little research, because I was interviewed by a guy once for a podcast. I'm telling you, this guy must have gone back years on my Facebook page. I mean, he knew stuff that I barely knew about myself. It was crazy. But man, talk about just a great feeling, and to be acknowledged like that, and to someone take the time to do that, right? It goes a long way on that.
So, Bill, I want to throw you a bit of a curveball here, but I've been listening. I've been listening to the words that you're using, and I have to go there. I just have to go and ask this question. So, I've heard you use the word authentic and empathy, and when you talked about just being even keel, that made me think of emotional control, and that's part of mindset. But the thing that you talked about is asking for help is not a weakness. And Correct. That just really stood out to me, because I think sometimes people do feel like that's a weakness. I just wanted to get your thoughts. Do you know where that comes from, or where do you think that comes from? We don't want to ask people for help.
Well, some don't. I mean, I'll tell you one lesson in asking for help was when I met my wife before we were married. She was working on a project, and I said, do you need any help? And she looks up and says, if I needed your help, I'd ask for it. And it wasn't in that even tone either. And so, that's the hot stove that you only have to touch once or twice, and you'll never touch it again, right? So now I'll tell her she's working on something. I don't even use the word help. I'll just say, hey, I'm watching the game in the other room. It's not an important one. If you could use any assistance, just let me know, right? She goes, okay. And then sometimes she'll ask me something. So, some people, I mean, I can't get into the deep psychology about this because I don't really know that. But some people are afraid that asking for referrals, for instance, it makes them look unsuccessful, right? Why are they asking for help to meet others? Is because they can't create their own successful business on their own. Well, that's just a mistaken thinking, because most of the very successful businesses out there, my expression is the way of the world is meeting people through other people, and the referral is the warm way we get into their lives, and forming that network of people who know you and like you and trust you, and you know them and like them and trust them, and that's the way businesses grow. And so just to be in that flow of that, some people maybe were raised to be macho or something. I don't know. They don't like asking for help. So, go see a cognitive therapist, or just understand that we're asking for help to help others. It comes from the belief in your value. It's back to that why thing we talked about, right? When you really truly believe in your value, or maybe I should say, if you truly believe in your value, are you willing to go places where you might feel a little uncomfortable to make sure that you bring that value to more people? And some will, some won't. Do you have to ask for referrals to be successful in business? No, I'm not saying it's the only way to get there. It's the most fun. It's usually the fastest. Most clients that come into most businesses through referrals are more profitable. They stay longer. So there certainly is a lot of good things about it. But yeah, there's other ways to go about it too.
Excellent. That was a curveball, but you knocked it out of the park. I appreciate that. Let's just shift to a final question that we always ask on this podcast, talking about failure. Bill, we love failure, and we know that sometimes you've got the best intentions and things just completely crumble. Doesn't go the way that you want at all. Can you share a time with our listeners that maybe, especially in referrals, I set it up, I was trying to get to that end goal, but the whole thing just didn't go the way I expected it to, and maybe what you learned from that?
Yeah, so my answer is going to be maybe a little different than what you expect, but it's something that happened to me when I graduated university, and I got a degree in sociology, which sets you up for nothing really. Uh, and so I took a job in sales, and I was selling home improvement services, and I had a manager, pretty nice guy, kind of tough in some ways, but my first month was to watch him. It was home improvement. It was in the home type sales, quite often in the evening when the homeowners were there. And so the first month I watched him do his thing. Then the next month it was my turn to start running, and he'd be there. So I'll never forget, it was probably my first or second night running up appointments. I actually did make the sale, and we went out to the car, and I'd driven that night. I'm getting ready to start the car, and he puts his hand on the keys. He won't let me start. I say, "What's up? You want to debrief?" He says, "You forgot the most important thing. I got the contract, it's signed. I got the check. What did I forget? You forgot to ask for referrals." Ah, yeah, I know about that. And you're good. Tell you what, I'll call the homeowner tomorrow and see if I can get some. This is what he said to me, right? He says, "Bill, if you don't go in there now, go back in and ask for referrals. I'm going to lay on the horn. It's going to wake up the neighborhood, below the sale. You're probably looking for new, all this." So we get into an argument, my second month on the job about why now is or is not a good time to go back to the house. And meantime, the downstairs light goes off, the upstairs light goes on. They're getting ready for bed, probably. Well, I didn't know any better. So I knocked on the door, and I said to the homeowner, I said, "Sorry to bother you again, but my manager, he's a maniac. He says if I don't ask you for referrals, I lose my job." Now, here's what saved me in this. This guy owned a business and had a sales team of his own. And he says, "Man, it takes a lot of guts to do what you just did. Come on in." He gave me some referrals for home improvement, and then he offered me a job to work for him. So a little different than what you expected, but here's the gift that sales manager gave me, right? I never forget about this. And then years later, I ended up building a business based on this. Right? I never forget. I may wimp out just like everybody else from time to time, or I just figure it's not the right time, but I don't ever forget about it. And if we can all have that little tool or that experience so we never forget, that's half the battle, just keeping it in our awareness, right?
Bill, I had one of those experiences, and the guy that's on this podcast, Steve, was my manager at the time. He said something very similar. He said, "You go back and ask that buyer why you lost the deal."
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do it, and I tucked my tail between my legs. I went and asked, and I got the best education in sales from that customer. It was the right thing to do, but it was the most painful thing to do. But I had a good manager that forced me to do it.
Can I add something to this, if you don't mind, if we have a second?
Yeah.
Jump in.
I had a tennis coach one time when I started taking tennis lessons. Early on, I won like this summer tournament, and I was a beginner. And he gives me the trophy, and he says, "You're pretty proud of that." I go, "Yes." He says, "I got to tell you something, Bill. I've seen you play. You won the tournament. You're never going to be any good at this game." And I hold up the trophy, and I go, "Excuse me?" He says, yeah, you beat up a bunch of beginners. You're not playing to win. You're playing not to lose." And as soon as he said that, he nailed me. I mean, I got it instantly. I was afraid to lose the point, right? Lose the game, set, match, that I wouldn't hit the ball with more pace. I wouldn't come to the net more often. And so how do you know if you're playing to win or playing not to lose? Well, when you're willing to lose, right? That's when you know. It doesn't mean you're going to. And maybe you will from time to time and learn, like you just said. But you can't be afraid of losing, because then you play everything just a little too safe. And you don't often say the thing or do the thing that might make the real difference for you.
Well, I have a hunch that I know what you'll be watching tonight and tomorrow with the women's final at the U.S. Open. And
Yeah. I do
tennis.
enjoy it. And it's so hot there, too. I don't know how they play in that heat, but
I don't
anyway.
know. Yeah. So, Bill, this has been a fantastic interview. I think you have given us so many things to share with our audience and our listeners. But more personally, I think I've picked up a ton of things today. But can you share with our audience how they can get a hold of you, where they can reach you, your podcasts, a little bit about your books maybe, and how they can get a hold of them, and go from there.
Thank you. So the book we mentioned, Radical Relevance and Beyond Referrals, Amazon, US, Canada. Website is referralcoach.com. My podcast is geared towards financial professionals, financial advisors. And with that said, just about any business person, salesperson could probably also glean some good stuff from it. And that's Top Advisor. Sorry, I forgot the name of my podcast, topadvisorpodcast.com. So thanks for asking.
We'll put all the links in the show notes, Bill. And want to thank you because you have helped us solve the sales problem. And Bill, you have earned a referral from the two great Canadian growth guys on this podcast. So if you need a referral, you know where to look. Steve and I will gladly do it.
Yeah, let me think on that. I'll take you up on it. Thank you.
And you gave our listeners some knowledge that they need to thrive and succeed. You've helped them grow by enhancing what they know. Listeners, if you're still listening at this point, we love you and we appreciate you. Thanks for listening. I hope you've learned a lot on the podcast today, and please share this with anybody that you know that could be a listener that can get something out of our podcast. We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, keep on building the best version of you.